Welcome to Streets and Eats, everybody. Today on the podcast, we've got Rebecca, a full-time RV nomad, food photographer, and blogger. You know, to me, it's just fascinating to hear people's origin stories about how they get into becoming a full-time RVer or a digital nomad. We're digital nomads ourselves, and reaching out and connecting to other digital nomads is an amazing experience. Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries in all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you.
I know a little bit of your background story, and I do know that when you became full-time RVers, it wasn't exactly a smooth start, as is often the case with most full-time RVers. There's a whole learning curve involved, but you had like a experience that you had to suffer through first, and the idea that travel could continue, let alone heal, is amazing to me. So I'd really love to hear your story there to get started.
Yeah, of course. So thank you very much for having me. And I'll tell you that we had the idea, my husband and I, we had the idea of somehow becoming full-time travelers for many years before we actually made it happen. We thought, when our youngest graduates and goes off to college, if we could both be in a position where we worked remotely, then, maybe we could take off and live in different places. We thought maybe for months at a time or, whatever. We didn't really know how it would work out. So our youngest was getting ready to go off to college, and we met some people that, this would have been late 2019. We met some people that lived in an RV, and we didn't even know that that was a thing. We had no idea that people lived in RVs. And it was like the clouds parted, and we both were just like, that is exactly what we want to do. That's exactly it. And so
I love it, not to interrupt you, but I love it when you have those epiphanies.
Yeah.
Like you just sort of look at each other, your significant other, and you say, oh my gosh, that is it. And you both just know. We've had a few of those during our married life, and I think those are so significant.
Yeah. I mean, it really was an amazing experience, because at the time we were house sitting for some people in California, and we discovered that we loved being in a new location and kind of living and working in a new location, but we didn't like living in somebody else's house. Mm-hmm. And so we really were at kind of a crossroads of, we didn't know how we were going to make our dream of travel possible. And so when we met these people that lived in an RV, it was just such an epiphany. And so we had sold the house and moved into the RV 6 months after that. It was just like, wow, this is what we want to do. This is what we're going to do. We didn't know anything about RVing at all. So we did, tons and tons of research up until that point. We had never, either one of us had ever spent even one night in any kind of a camper. Before the first night we had spent in our RV, the house was already sold.
Wow.
That's a leap of faith right there.
So we bought the camper and we started to move in. We had about a week to move out of the house and into the RV. And 3 days into moving into the RV, our oldest son killed himself. Mm. And so that's how we started RV life.
Yeah.
Thank you. We had to continue moving out of the RV. And we had to keep going. We had a family that stepped in and helped us out tremendously, because we were kind of dead in the water for the first several days. Mm-hmm. And we had to keep moving out. We had a deadline. But I'll tell you what, it's been 3 years, almost 3 years to the day. And we both just really feel like travel saved us. Traveling for the last 3 years has been an amazing experience in so many different ways. But we've talked to other parents who have lost their children, and they've just not been able to get out of bed for 6 months. Mm-hmm. And we understand that feeling, but we had to. we had to get up. We had to move like every couple of weeks. The reservation was up and we had to find a new place to go. And it was constant where we had to learn what we were doing and learn how to live in an RV and learn how to move and learn how to park and learn how, like all of it. And so there was just so much to do and so much to learn that just kept us moving forward and kept us living and learning. And without that, I think it would have been likely that we would have gotten stuck for quite some time.
Yeah.
Understandable.
Would have been a completely different story, probably.
Yeah. I've never had to deal with anything quite as tragic as that. However, thank God. However, I do believe that traveling is good for the soul. I think it's good for I think one of the reasons Jim and I have such a good marriage, and I believe we have a good marriage, don't you, Jim?
I think we do.
I believe that a lot of that can be attributed to travel because our life has revolved around travel. Our kids have grown up traveling. Like you said, you're learning something new all the time. You're learning how to deal with X and Y and things that maybe you didn't think of beforehand. And you're working together all the time. And also, I think that intense togetherness makes a difference as well, because you learn how to communicate and you do those things that people tell you need for a good marriage that you don't necessarily know how to do on your own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And, travel has been a remedy for us in a lot of different ways, but for a lot of different people experiencing a lot of different situations, I really think that travel is just useful to our mindset and our perspective. And we've had to lean on each other in ways that we didn't anticipate. Also, the more places we go and the more just different people we meet, different ways of life we're exposed to, the more it shapes our overall perception about the world. And I think especially when you're going through a really, really difficult time, it's easy to get more narrow in your focus.
I agree.
And more narrow in your perspective. And I think that's part of getting stuck. You get in these loops and it's hard to get out of them.
Well, sometimes I think you don't realize you're in the loop.
Yeah.
You don't realize that you're stuck because it becomes such a part of your daily life.
That's right.
And I do agree with you. Whereas travel, you have no choice to do that. It doesn't work that way. You can't get stuck.
When the world is closing in around you, if you're constantly moving and pushing against that, that can only help for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And, especially when you're in a state of depression or, just anything else that is a difficult state of mind, you go new places and you're reminded there are good things in the world. There are good things to see. There's good things to do.
Good food to eat.
There's good food to eat.
And good people. We have found good people literally everywhere in this world, every corner.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So just last night, we were out walking after the workday, and we met a couple that lives in the area, and we started talking to them. And they went off on a tangent about all sorts of political perspectives that we don't agree with. And we nodded along and smiled. And at the end of it, I said, I don't think we agree on pretty much anything that you just said. But one thing I know for sure is that everywhere we go, if you actually get out and meet people and talk to them, you realize they're nice, good people, even if you disagree with them about everything.
That's right.
That's
a great way of putting it.
Mm-hmm. And we've all met those people that we don't agree with.
Well, and we've had those experiences all around the world as Americans, where you come into a country where maybe Americans aren't quite so popular, and you get into these conversations with someone locally, and you find out very quickly what they think about American politics or government. And it almost always comes around to them and us agreeing that, that's the government. We may or may not agree with it, but people are people everywhere you go. Yeah. And you can always make a connection. Yes. And that almost always happens.
Yes. And, if you're in your own little world, in your tiny little corner of the world that you never get out of, and you're really only getting a bigger picture of the world from your news channel or your computer screen or,
Right.
whatever, then it's easy to get a distorted picture that people are not good, that they're not nice, that they're not friendly.
That's
I
right.
agree with
That's
you
true.
100%.
Yeah, especially when that's what everybody is telling you in those channels that you're paying attention to.
That's right. That's right.
Very, very astute. Right. I have to tell you, I do agree with everything you're saying.
But we won't go into politics, though.
No, please no.
Please no. Oh, so I was going to ask, where are you currently at right now?
Yeah, so we're currently in southwestern Colorado. We're just past the New Mexico border at a campground called Navajo. And we might actually, traveling full time, you're constantly problem solving. And we might get to stay here longer than we had anticipated, because driving here, we had a problem with our truck where the axle needs to be replaced, and they've had to back order the axle. So,
oh no,
we might be changing plans and staying longer than we thought. I don't know. We're going to figure that out as we go. But it's a lovely campground.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. And you're from Colorado, but it's probably not anywhere near where you're from.
Yeah, no, we're from the Denver metro area. So the plan is to head there in about a week and a half to the Denver metro area so we can see our daughters and we can see the rest of our family. And that might just have to get a little bit delayed. I don't know. We'll see. We hope not. We're anxious to see them all. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely living in an RV, things break just pretty much nonstop.
That's one of the things, like I said, one of the experiences we had. And here we are on our virgin trip, our, very first trip. And we had a fire on the cable that hooked between the car, the one that hooks up from the car to the RV, the lights and everything. And luckily, because people are wonderful, there was some guys who were on a motorcycle trip, and they're like, you've got a problem here. There's smoke coming from your wires. We need to check this out.
Yeah, we didn't even know.
We didn't even know at that point. And they stayed with us. We were out in the middle of nowhere. I guess we were in Colorado.
It was in Colorado, yeah.
It was in Colorado. And
eastern Colorado, right on the border.
Oh, okay, sure. I mean, we're talking boonies here, like out in the middle of nowhere, and we just happened to be converged with these guys, and they stayed with us the entire time. They brought out their repair kits. One guy was very good at fixing electronics or whatever on cars, and he rerouted everything. And then, of course, we had to go and get it fixed. I mean, that was just a makeshift repair. But yeah, I mean, on our very first time we took it out on a big trip, we had problems. And I think that's one of the things that I have to say. We've since sold our RV, and I'm not sure that I would go the RV route again. So kudos to you for not letting that bother you. For me, I was like, this is a little bit too much.
Yeah, well, if it wasn't for my husband is very mechanically inclined and very good at fixing everything. And one of the things when we first were just starting to look into what it would be like to live in an RV, we read story after story after story from full-time RVers who would have to take their RV into a dealership to get it repaired, and the dealership would have it for weeks or sometimes months at a time. Yeah. And that's their home. And then they would get it back, and they'd be 3 states away, and the same thing would break again. And they'd have to decide, do we go to a new dealership or do we take it back to the other one? And so, my husband said, okay, we're just never going to take it to a dealership. I'm going to fix everything. And
good for him.
So far, he has. I mean, we've had some fairly major things go wrong with now it's also one of the reasons why we chose a fifth wheel instead of like a Class A or a Class C, because, like our truck is in the shop right now, but we're still at home. And so, so that was one of the major considerations. But if he wasn't good about fixing things, and he doesn't mind fixing things, and so I feel like if you're going to full-time RV, you need at least one of you that is that is able to do that. Because, when we first moved in, somebody said, well, every time you move, it's like taking your house through an earthquake. And I was like, that is true. You're like taking it through like a 7-hour earthquake. It's just shaking around and rattling, and you don't know what the road is going to be like, and whatever. And so things break, they fall apart, and you just have to fix them. It's just part of the game.
I do think the part I did love was the fact that we had all our stuff, and we had that home feeling. Like, at the end of the day, I mean, I've traveled all over the world, and I can be at home in the weirdest of places. But, and I would even call it home. Like Jim and I'll be gone for 3 days. Like, we're going to Greece next week. And I tell you, within a day or two, we'll be calling the hotel home. Let's go home. Let's get this done. At home we need to, blah, 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 because that's just how we think and we feel. Yeah. But in an RV, it really is home.
Yep. Yeah, it's our favorite thing, honestly, because we both love travel, and we're also both kind of homebodies. We like being home. We like working from home. We have no problems being home, just the two of us, for days at a time without seeing another soul. We have no problems with that. And so, in an RV, the location and the scenery outside our windows changes, and the opportunities for what to do on the weekends and in the evenings changes, but we're always home. So we get to travel all the time, and we also get to be home all the time. And it really, truly is our favorite part.
Yeah, I love that part too. I really did. I thought that was definitely the gem of RVing.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so when we first got our trailer, the pinch cable actually was like the third major outing out with it. It wasn't like the very first thing that happened, like she made it sound, but it was pretty early on.
It felt like it.
And the repairs that the guys did for us, that was amazing that they were there to help us with that, because that's when I realized, okay, I had tools, but I didn't have an electrical repair kit or anything like that.
Yes.
So that's when I realized that's something that needs to be in the toolkit. So that was cool. Changing the cable once we got to a campground and we had time, that really wasn't a big deal. I love working on things too, so that's not a problem. But the very first time that we took our RV out, we were pretty smart about it. We just went to a local campground and, kind of do a shakedown. Like you said, a lot of times you get a new trailer or a fifth wheel from the dealer, and it's got issues on it coming out of the dealer.
Yes.
So you want to find those before you hit the road. So that's what we did. We got to this campground. It was in the afternoon, pretty much drove there straight from the dealer. And the very first thing, trying to take the trailer off the hitch from the vehicle, and it wouldn't release. And I'm like, I know I'm doing something wrong. What am I doing wrong? But I mean, there's just so many steps in everything that you do that until you really get a good workflow, can really be challenging. So I'm just curious, did you have any, like at the very beginning, or maybe it still happens occasionally, things that happen that you're like, oh, geez, I should have known that.
Yeah, for sure. So we actually took, so it was a brand new fifth wheel, and we drove it off the lot knowing there was some things wrong with it. And we drove it off the lot anyway. The house was sold and we only had a week to move out, and we were picking it up from a dealership in Texas, and we needed to get it back to Colorado and move out. And so we had already decided we're going to go in and we're going to get that RV, and whatever is wrong with it, we knew there was going to be some stuff wrong with it. Whatever's wrong with it, we're going to fix it. So, so our
You're brave.
So our at the dealership, they gave us this very cursory walkthrough, and we said, we're brand new RVers. We don't know anything about this. And the guy who was giving us the walkthrough said, well, I've never been inside this RV either, this model either. And we were like, okay, all right, well, then we won't ask you a lot of questions because you're not going to have any. Like we just knew we're going to have to figure it out as we go. So when they were hitching it up to the truck, we said, we don't know how to do this. We have never hitched up a fifth wheel to the truck before. And so they said, okay. And instead of showing us what to do, they just did it. And then we started to drive it off the lot, and we didn't know what it was supposed to feel like, but we thought it probably wasn't supposed to feel like the way it felt.
Right.
So we drove it up the road, just a little ways up the road into a Walmart parking lot, and sat in the truck and watched YouTube videos for how to hitch up a trailer and unhitched and rehitched, and they had done it wrong. They had hitched it up.
Oh, you're kidding.
And so we learned in the Walmart parking lot how to hitch. We did it a couple of times in that Walmart parking lot, and then got back in the truck and drove to our first campground. And our first campground was only about 45 minutes away. The camp hosts are really nice. When we pulled in, we said, we've never parked a fifth wheel before. We don't know what we're doing. And they came out and helped us, gave us lots of good information and lots of help. So, that first night was so much fun. We're pushing every button and trying everything. Right. And we're just like so over the moon that we live here now. I mean, we were so excited. And we had decided when we pulled in that we weren't going to hook up we were only there for one night, so we weren't going to hook up all of the sewer. We thought the next morning we'll just dump the tank and then go to the next campground. So we're taking showers. The shower was leaking. Steve had to go buy caulking because they hadn't caulked the shower, So we're doing all this stuff, and we're discovering the things that are wrong with it, the things that we need to fix. And the next morning he goes out to dump the tanks, and we didn't know that our tanks were just open.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
From out of the dealership, they weren't closed.
Oh, you're kidding.
Open. So all night we're just dumping all of our tanks just onto the ground.
I'm surprised no one came and said something to you.
Me too. Yeah. So we had quite the cleanup to do.
Oh.
We left that campground.
That's horrible.
I will be happy to say though that we haven't dumped wastewater on the ground since. So
only once. That's all it takes.
Wow.
Oh, that's horrible.
So
it is a learning curve. I definitely think it's a learning curve. And Jim and I, even though we work really well together, I mean, you get little with each other a little bit, and I'm like, I'm telling you to turn right. Why aren't you turning right? Things like that. But luckily we get over it quickly enough, and we know that actually just makes it stronger in the long run. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. The more you talk about it, the more I'm kind of happy we sold ours. Although I have to say there's so many good things about it as well.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone though, for sure. I mean, we talk to a lot of people on the road that find out that we live here full time, and they say, oh, I would love to do that. And one of the first things we say is, if you can be patient with all of the problems that are going to arise, and if those aren't going to, you can cut this out if I'm not allowed to say this, but years ago, I read this article that was actually written to young adults, and the article was titled, "What Flavor of Shit Do You Want to Eat?" And the point was, hey kids, you're going to go out into the world, and there's no such thing as some perfect scenario where you're going to wake up every day and love to do everything about that job. You're just going to love every aspect of it. Your job is to figure out which flavor of shit you don't mind eating as much.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And that's the truth of RVing. We love it so much. This nomadic lifestyle of being able to move from place to place and always be home, that the problems don't really bother us. It's not that they're not problems, and it's not that they're not hassles and headaches, and we would prefer to not have any of them.
Of course.
But they're so minor in comparison to how much enjoyment we get out of it. And I think that's the goal with any kind of life, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's the balance. I'm a big person to talk about balance all the time. And I do think you're absolutely right. Jim and I talk about this on a pretty regular basis about what you whether it's relationships with other people, whether it's, marital relationships, whether it's friendships, whether it's work relationships, you always need to know yourself first, right?
Yep.
You
Yep.
need to know what you can handle, what you're willing to put up with, and what's going to trigger you to be a little bit more on edge or whatever. And once you get to know yourself, then you can start dealing with everything else. And I will beat the pavement and say that travel will teach that to you, because you are constantly, whether or not you have an RV and you're dealing with that piece of it, or you're traveling just anywhere, you're always solving problems. You're always have something new that you encounter that you need to do something with. So you have to feel confident, I think.
That's right. You know, my husband and I have also driven all over the country on our motorcycle. Before we bought this RV, we spent, I think, 4 summers taking long motorcycle trips, and we rode through every state in the United States, from starting in Colorado. Our last long trip was riding from Colorado up to Alaska. And it's a long ways from Colorado.
It is.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. And some of those roads are not the best.
It's true. And we had several days of weather that was not great going through Canada, where it was just, 8 hours of driving rain. And so we're sitting on a motorcycle for 8 hours straight and just driving rain and cold. And it wasn't that much fun, honestly.
Sure.
But then we were in Alaska on a motorcycle. And that was amazing. Like, really one of the best experiences of our entire life. And so, it's just another example of, if you're willing to what are you willing to put up with for the experience? And if you're willing to put up with that, then you get the reward of, I'm in Alaska on a motorcycle. And like in Alaska, I know you guys have been.
We lived there actually for 8 years.
Oh, you lived there for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we right away discovered we could point the bike in any direction and it's going to be a great ride.
It's going to be gorgeous. But the roads may not be the best, but it's going to be gorgeous.
The roads were terrible, but that's okay. That's okay.
Where did you go in Alaska?
Oh man, we went all over the place. We rode all over the Anchorage area. We rode all the way up to Fairbanks.
Mm-hmm.
Denali, of course. We spent 9 days there, and I think we rode 3,000 or 4,000 miles in Alaska.
Wow.
So we really saw as much as we could. And
that's a great trip.
That sounds like a wonderful trip. Yeah. We love Alaska. It's close to our heart.
So your fifth wheel, does your fifth wheel have a garage in the back? Do you have your motorcycles still with you?
Yep, we do. Yeah, we do. And the garage actually serves as my husband's office during the work week. And it's also our guest room. So our daughters can come to stay with us. We've had our parents come to stay, some friends or whatever. We remodeled the entire inside of the fifth wheel to make it home. We didn't want it to feel like we were living in an RV. Mm-hmm. So we put in, like regular furniture and some of the RV furniture, and we painted and we did a whole bunch of stuff. But the garage, when we're traveling, it hauls the motorcycle, and then during the work week, it's an office. And then we put in a couch that folds out into a bed. And there's also a separate little half bath back there. So whoever's staying with us has their own toilet and sink. And so that's kind of nice. So it works out well. And I'm a recipe developer. And so I'm in the kitchen a lot of the week. And so having a separate room where we could shut the door. My husband is on Zoom calls pretty much nonstop for his job. And so being able to shut the door so that he can do his thing and I can do mine without much interference, that has been really essential for us to be able to live this way.
I think that's key as well. It's like we were saying, I mean, it sounds like you guys really thought about all the things that you needed to be successful. And I feel like, and my audience will definitely tune in if they don't agree, but I feel like a lot of people who do this, they spend time shopping for their RV, but they may not necessarily think about all the different aspects of what each thing means. And just the fact that you knew that you were going to have separate workspaces. Yeah. Jim and I pretty much do the same thing. And we've worked together for years and years and years and years. And so we can be in the same room. Even when we worked in a school if we shared an office sometimes, people are like, how do you spend that much time with him? Not a problem. but we're good at ignoring each other. Like we don't have to talk to each other for 8 hours if we don't need to.
Yes. Yeah.
We're good at that. But we had to know that going into it, and you have to know exactly what you need. What kind of place to sit. Like mine has to be ergonomically so, his does in a different way because we're not the same people.
Right.
It's just really interesting, all the different aspects that you have to think about. And I think that's hard to do. So again.
Yeah, we went through, I don't know, at least 100 and probably more different RVs before we settled on the model that we wanted and the floor plan that would work. And we knew certain things going in, like what we would need in terms of workspaces. Finding a kitchen large enough to be a food photographer and a recipe developer in a toy hauler was really challenging. Most toy haulers give you a large living room area and a tiny kitchen, like super tiny kitchen. And it needed to be in a layout where I could set up my camera and my lighting. And so, a lot of models, the kitchen is kind of closed off and there's just not enough room for that kind of thing. And so it just took us quite a while to find one with an open plan that devoted quite a bit of space to the kitchen, but also had the separate garage. And when we found it, we were like, oh, there we go. That's exactly what we've been looking for. But, going through RV after RV after RV helped us even know what our options were, because you don't even know what your options are until you start looking. And then you realize, oh, that's really cool. I don't like anything else about this, but that's really cool. And now that goes to the top of the list and you want to find a model with that, plus the other things that you need. And so, by going through so many different models, we learned what we wanted, what was available. And then one thing that we didn't know going in that we know now is an RV isn't like a car where you have to keep everything the way it is. You can customize an RV pretty much any way you want if you're capable and willing to do it. So, the floor plan is the floor plan, but if we really wanted to, we could rearrange the kitchen. It's fine. We could take out the dining room table and put in something else, right? There's a lot of options once you get in for what you can change just to best suit your needs.
Sure.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have even thought of that.
No, not really.
I'm one of those consumers who's like, I want what I want and I better get it. And I'm not really willing to change it. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And but we also spent a lot of time looking at floor plans and, trying to decide exactly what we wanted. It's challenging because you do run into like these floor plans that are very similar across a wide range. And like maybe they all have a bunkhouse type room with three bunk beds, and like we don't need that. That's space wasted for us.
Yes.
I can't imagine though doing cooking and recipe development in an RV. That's got to be a real challenge. It does sound like you found a good floor plan and you've got a layout that works, but it still has to be challenging. I mean, that's a small space.
Yeah. So for an RV, we have a really great kitchen, and it's actually been less challenging than I was anticipating. In our old house, I had a very large kitchen, tons of counter space, plenty of storage. And obviously, I have significantly less now of all of those things. But I've realized how little space you actually need to make pretty much anything you want to make. If you have the space, then you'll use it up. I mean, it's like anything else in life. If you have it, you'll use it. It doesn't matter how much money you have, you will need that much money. It doesn't matter how much space you have, you'll need that much space, right? And so working within constraints, I've realized, I don't really have that many limits to what's possible and what it is that I can do here. Now, on days where I'm shooting photographs for a recipe, that is a little bit more challenging because I take up the entire living space in order to make that happen. And so I've learned that it works best to kind of batch everything together. And so I will develop maybe 4 or 5 recipes. And then once I get to the place where I'm ready to take photos of them, I'll do them all in one day. I might start shooting at 8:00 in the morning and not finish till 10:00 at night. But that way it's one day where the space is taken over by that process and not every day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
On my blog, we have a few recipes. We don't have tons, nothing like what you've done, but I do have a little experience in this. And so are you, when you say you batch it, are you then making the recipe again so you can get all the steps so that you're still cooking these 4 recipes again, and you're going from ingredient to end product, and then of course, whatever social you need and what have you?
Yeah, exactly. So, so the actual working out a recipe might happen within a week, or it might happen over the course of several months. It just depends on the recipe itself. I've published cake recipes where I've made that recipe, I don't know, 16 or 18 times before I've actually gotten to the place where I thought, okay, it's ready to publish. And so, I've always got maybe 20 or 30 recipes that I'm working on. We're eating whatever it is that I'm working on. And so sometimes I'm like, yeah, I don't think we can eat that another time.
Not for a while.
And so I'll put it off and then I'll come back to it again in a few months. But once a recipe is ready to be published, then I start by taking a photo of the ingredients, and then I take photos all the way through the process so that there's process shots. And then of course there's the plated shots as well. So, some recipes I might end up taking 30 or 40 photos for, some will be less. So, it's a long process, and there's a lot of material then to work with after. But again, in our house, I had a actual room set up as a studio. So I could just walk in and it was already set up for me, and I could, take a few shots here and there. But in the RV, getting all of the equipment out and getting it set up and getting it situated and moving things around, and, it's a little bit more of an ordeal. And so doing several recipes in one day tends to work
better for you. Well, that's good to know.
Okay. So who eats all this food?
Oh man.
Do you share it with the campground?
Sometimes I do. So it's interesting because when we lived in a neighborhood, our neighbors got food nonstop. And at the time we had teenagers at home, so they would bring their friends home.
Right.
One time, one of our daughters brought a friend home, and I had 16 cake layers just all over the house. And the friend was like, "What is happening here?" And I was like, "Grab a fork and dig in." So, it was easy to give away food then. Here, living in an RV, it's a little strange, I feel like, to, walk over to strangers and say, "Hey, you don't know me, but here's some cupcakes."
Yeah.
I think they probably would appreciate that. I know if I were next to you, I'd be like, "What smells good over there?"
I have done it. There are certain situations where I think, okay, this might be appropriate. Like if we park next to a group where there's a whole group of them, and maybe there's teenagers in the group, and they're there to party and have fun, then I often will come out and say, "Hey, here's what I do for a living, and I've been working on this recipe, and would you like it?" And that works out fine. Sometimes the camp hosts or people in the office at an RV park, if I feel like they're, open and friendly, and then I'll make that effort to kind of tell them a little bit about me and then bring them what I'm working on. So I try to do it as much as possible. We've met actually some really good friends, or we've made a handful of really good friends exactly because of that, because, they waved and said hello, and we had a short conversation. And then the next day I showed up and knocked on their door with a basket of muffins, or, whatever.
Nice.
Or we've had people that we just met that we've camped next to over for dinner for that reason, because I've been working on a recipe and we had food to share. And so it has actually been a vehicle for just meeting new people and getting to know some people. But
yeah, that's cool.
How much time do you spend in each place about?
That's what I was going to ask too.
Because I think that the whole idea of being in an RV park, and we noticed this when we were doing it, is there are some people that are there for such a long time. Like they practically live there. You can tell by their setup because it's very like set in stone. Permanent. There's the word. And then of course there's people like us that were there for a few days and then we'd move on. So about how much time do you spend?
Yeah. So, well, a couple of things on that. So, I plan our entire year a year in advance. So I make the plan and I set the reservations a full year in advance. So I'll start planning next year, probably in the next month or so. And I do that for a few reasons. We like to go places that are popular. Sometimes you can't get a space. We have a large RV and we need, certain campgrounds will only have 2 or 3 spots that are big enough for us. And so, I mark reservation dates on my calendar. When does the reservation window up for this park? And I'm on it the second the reservation window opens so that I can get, some places will let you reserve a year in advance. Some places only 3 months in advance. And so you have to be very diligent about nailing down those reservations as far in advance as possible. But, last year we determined that we wanted to stay in certain areas for longer. And so we made a big loop around Lake Michigan, started down in the Chicago area and then ended on the Wisconsin side. And so we did that over 4 months. So we were in and around Lake Michigan over 4 months. We moved to, I think, 5 different campgrounds over that period. But, there's a couple of those campgrounds where we stayed for an entire month. Just because there was so much that we wanted to do and see while we were in the area. This year, we're moving about every 2 weeks. And so we've had a few stretches where we've moved every week. We try to stay at least 2 weeks because we work during the work week. And so we want to have one weekend at a place where we can actually get out and do some deeper exploring of the area than what's available just in the evenings. So, and if we're in a place, if we're going to an area where I know that there's more to do and see than one weekend is going to be able to hold, then I'll do my best to make a reservation for us for 3 or even 4 weeks. So it really just depends on what we want to do and see while we're there.
But you're moving pretty constantly, it sounds like. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
This year we decided to do a lot of state parks, and state parks are honestly our favorite places to stay. We do a lot of boondocking as well. When we first moved in to the RV, we put in a whole solar, and we really got this thing outfitted to live off the grid indefinitely if we wanted to. We camped on the beach of the Texas Gulf for several weeks in January and into February down by Galveston. And, we're just parked right on a beach, no hookups, no anything. And that's really fun. But state parks are great because they're almost always in really beautiful locations. They're almost always very nicely laid out with a lot of room in between each spaces.
Yeah.
They're very rarely overly expensive. They're usually extremely reasonable. And everybody is so happy to be there. It's so fun to be at places where you're just surrounded by people on vacation. The vacation energy is just, it's so great to just constantly be surrounded by people that are so happy to be there. So we love state parks, but state parks will often only let you stay for 2 weeks. They usually have a 14-day limit. And so that's why we're moving more often this year than we did last year, because we're just staying in a lot more state parks.
So except for Hawaii and maybe Alaska, because they are not contiguous, has your RV been in all 48 states?
No. So the RV has been in 30, I think, maybe 31. And yeah. And we do plan on taking it to Alaska, actually.
You can easily get to it. Not easily. Maybe a stretch, but you can get to Alaska, I know. But Hawaii, that's pretty much out of the question, I would think.
We haven't gone to the East Coast with it yet. We've done all of the Pacific Northwest, all of the West, a good part of the South. And then, of course, the Michigan and Illinois and Wisconsin area last year. So, but we haven't gone to the East Coast yet. We'd actually planned on going to the East Coast. We'd like to spend a summer in Maine sometime soon. And we had planned on doing that this year. And then our daughters decided that they wanted to move to Seattle. And we thought, well, if they're going to move to Seattle, us being in Maine would be like as far away in the country as we could get. And we thought that they might need us on hand to kind of help with that transition. And so we changed the plan, and now we're headed to Seattle that time of year instead.
Well, it's a nice area. We just moved out of Tacoma about 6 months ago. So.
Yeah, well, it's great to be able to go north in the summer.
Absolutely.
South in the winter.
Yeah, that's
absolutely. Right. That's I think one of the things that RVing is good for. And we have such a large country, such a diverse country, that you can do that. You can have almost optimal weather conditions all year long.
True. It's true, and we feel like we could travel around the United States for, I don't know how many years before we would run out of new places to go. There's just so many places to see. But, at some point in the next few years, one of the other reasons why we really wanted to move into an RV is to do some international travel. The nice thing about an RV is you can just put it in storage. You don't have a home to take care of.
Right.
So we could take off and decide we wanted to live in Italy for 6 months or, whatever, and just put the RV in storage, go do that, come back, which definitely kind of opens up those possibilities for us as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you guys really have it together a lot more than maybe I feel like we did. but I also think that, our focus is more world travel than it is. And we've been to all 50 states. We've done tons of the United States. We love traveling in our country, and we love national parks and state parks, everything that you've mentioned. But I think that we spent a lot of time overseas. So that was one of the reasons that we went ahead and sold the RV when we did, because we didn't want to leave it in storage for too long. Like you said, it breaks down as it is.
That's right. For sure. Yeah. If you're not using it, then it's not that worth it. But yeah, at some point in the next few years, the other thing that we plan on doing in the next couple of years is buying a boat and, spending maybe summers, on a sailboat. And, likewise, we can put the RV in storage for a couple of months and live on the boat for a few months.
That'll be even tighter than your 400 square
meters. That's right.
It really will.
I'll be curious to talk to you again when you're developing recipes.
Yeah, right. And the photography.
Probably I'll shoot all the recipes in the RV and then just work on the editing and the writing up.
There you go.
That'll be a whole new level of batching.
What we can't imagine ever doing is not living in something mobile. I think that's the thing. We realized just instantly how well suited we are to this life. And so the idea of living someplace permanently that couldn't move with us, that didn't have the ability to move with us, just, I don't know. It sounds horrible to us now. We can't imagine going back.
We're pretty nomadic too. We kind of have the same issue, and we had been living overseas in several different countries for so long, and then we both retired and came back to the States when our daughter had our grandchild, and we bought a house and thought, we can do this, but it wasn't even a full year, and we sold the house, we sold everything, and we moved overseas again.
Yeah, it's just not us.
Yep.
But what is I know how our family has reacted to us being nomadic. How is your family and your friends, how have they reacted? Do they think you're nuts?
So when we first told them, there was definitely some people that thought we were nuts. I remember I told my dad that we were going to buy a RV and move into it. And he was just like, he just thought that was the worst idea he'd ever heard. And a couple months later, he was like, what are you guys doing this weekend? And I said, well, we're sorting through and getting rid of stuff so that we can get ready to move into this RV. And he says, you were serious about that? I was like, yeah, we're actually doing this. And now he gets it, right? He's like, oh, that suits you for sure. But yeah, a lot of people were concerned. They were like, well, what happens if they get into this situation? And what happens if they get into that situation? And the people who know us well were not concerned at all. They were like, well, they'll deal with it. Whatever comes up, they'll deal with it. It'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our daughters weren't surprised at all when we told them that this is what we were going to do. They were like, well, yeah, of course, that's gonna suit you guys well. They would prefer for us to be closer all of the time. But we've managed to see them about every other month, pretty much no matter what.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, we see them a lot. So either we come back to Colorado or we fly them out to us. And so we've actually flown them out to stay with us quite a few times over the last few years, which is great for them because they want to see places too, and they want to travel. So once I plan the year, they kind of look at it and they'll say, I'd like
this
to
sounds like fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. And so then we fly them out. So they totally understand.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. Well, I can't tell you how fun it was talking to you, Rebecca. We really, I think we're kindred spirits.
Yes.
We love travel. We love everything about it. You're doing it a little bit differently than we do it, but that's okay.
That's right.
There are many ways to do everything. I do believe traveling is good for the soul, and I think that you're such a good example of that. And it just shows in how happy you are and how content in life you are. And I wish that for everyone.
Yes.
That's right.
Me too. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you both. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and all that you guys are offering to the world of all of us travelers. It's very useful.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. And if we ever get to cross paths, let's meet up in real life. I'm sure we'd have a blast. And we'll eat your food. We'll eat those.
I'll eat your food.
I was going to say, I'll have you over for dinner.
It sounds great.
We'll be there. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.